For years, Princess Anne's inner circle remained silent, guarding secrets that never crossed palace walls. But now, one trusted aide has finally broken ranks, revealing what truly unfolded behind closed doors during a meeting that left senior royals shaken. What seemed like an ordinary gathering quickly spiraled into something far more explosive, something that could change how the public sees the monarchy forever. Before we go deeper into what this really means for the royal family, make sure to subscribe so you don't miss a single update. The story began with an urgent summons that caught even seasoned palace insiders off guard. Princess Anne was reportedly called to a highly confidential meeting, one that appeared so sensitive that normal royal procedures were quietly set aside. Those familiar with palace operations would later describe an atmosphere unlike anything they had witnessed in years. Senior aides were instructed to clear schedules, private communications became unusually restricted, and access to key areas was tightly controlled. Nothing about the gathering felt routine. In fact, the extraordinary precautions immediately triggered speculation among those who worked closest to the monarchy. Something important was unfolding, and only a select few were being allowed anywhere near it. As preparations intensified, the list of individuals permitted inside the meeting grew remarkably small. Even long-serving palace staff found themselves excluded from discussions they would normally have supported. The secrecy itself became a source of concern. Royal households are accustomed to protecting sensitive information, but this felt different. Staff members were reportedly reminded of confidentiality protocols with unusual urgency, while conversations in corridors suddenly stopped whenever certain names were mentioned. The message was unmistakable. Whatever was being discussed had to remain hidden at all costs. Then came the meeting itself. Hours passed behind closed doors as senior figures deliberated over matters that, according to later accounts, carried enormous consequences for the future. No official statement followed. No carefully prepared palace briefing appeared. Instead, silence settled over the institution. Yet silence can sometimes be louder than any announcement. Those who encountered Princess Anne afterward reportedly noticed an immediate change. Known throughout the royal family for her composure, discipline, and unwavering sense of duty, Anne allegedly emerged from the gathering carrying an expression that many struggled to forget. There was concern, there was determination, and perhaps most striking of all, there was a seriousness that suggested the issues discussed were far from ordinary. Within hours, whispers began circulating among royal insiders. Small observations that seemed insignificant on their own started connecting into a larger and more troubling picture. Why had security measures been increased? Why were trusted staff suddenly being kept at a distance? Why had several senior figures remained unavailable for so long afterward? The questions multiplied faster than answers could be provided. Meanwhile, palace officials maintained complete silence, refusing to acknowledge that anything unusual had occurred. But the absence of information only fueled curiosity. Rumors spread quietly through royal circles, with each new theory adding another layer of mystery to an already puzzling situation. For years, those rumors remained exactly that, rumors. The people closest to the event stayed loyal to their obligations and protected whatever secrets were contained within that room. Yet time has a way of weakening even the strongest walls of silence. Eventually, one aide who had witnessed the aftermath firsthand reportedly decided that the story could no longer remain buried. What they revealed did not simply confirm that the meeting had been extraordinary. It suggested that the monarchy had been confronting a dispute far more serious than the public ever realized. A dispute whose consequences would continue to ripple through royal circles long after the doors had closed and the participants had gone their separate ways. But the aide's revelation was only the beginning, because the meeting itself centered on a royal dispute that had been quietly escalating for months. Long before the palace doors were closed that day, tensions had already reached a boiling point. What appeared calm on the surface concealed rivalries, disagreements, and growing concerns that few outsiders could see. The aide's revelation had opened a door that many believed would remain locked forever, but understanding what happened inside that meeting required looking much further back. The gathering did not emerge from nowhere. It was the culmination of months of mounting pressure, private disagreements, and growing unease among some of the most senior members of the royal household. While public appearances continued as planned and official duties were carried out with practiced precision, a very different story was unfolding behind the scenes. Beneath the carefully maintained image of unity, difficult questions were beginning to surface. Questions about responsibility, questions about the future, and most importantly, questions about who would ultimately bear the burden of protecting the monarchy during one of its most uncertain periods. At the center of many of these discussions stood Princess Anne. For decades, she had built a reputation as one of the monarchy's most dependable figures, someone who rarely sought attention and almost never allowed personal emotions to interfere with duty. Yet even Anne could not ignore the growing concerns circulating within royal circles. According to insiders, she became increasingly involved in a series of private consultations that were taking place with unusual frequency. Meetings that would normally be routine suddenly carried greater significance. Conversations that once focused on immediate responsibilities began shifting toward long-term stability. It was as though everyone sensed that a crossroads was approaching, even if no one could fully agree on what the path forward should be. As weeks passed, disagreements reportedly became harder to contain. Different viewpoints emerged regarding the future direction of the institution and the responsibilities that would inevitably fall upon key members of the family. Some believed urgent changes were necessary. Others favored caution, fearing that any major decision could create unintended consequences. What began as private debate slowly evolved into something more serious. The atmosphere inside royal operations reportedly became noticeably strained, with senior staff finding themselves navigating tensions that were impossible to ignore. Small disagreements carried greater weight. Minor scheduling discussions sometimes evolved into broader conversations about leadership and duty. The pressure was building, and everyone could feel it. Those closest to palace operations allegedly noticed the shift before anyone else. Trusted aides, advisors, and long-serving staff members reportedly began exchanging concerned observations. Certain meetings were being arranged with increasing urgency. Confidential discussions followed one another in rapid succession. Decisions that once took days were suddenly being revisited repeatedly. While no official explanation was ever provided, many insiders started reaching the same conclusion independently. Something significant was approaching. The monarchy was preparing for a decision that could alter relationships, responsibilities, and perhaps even the balance of influence within the institution itself. What made the situation even more unsettling was the uncertainty surrounding it. No single event appeared responsible for the growing tension. Instead, it was a collection of unresolved concerns that seemed to be converging at the same moment. Every conversation appeared connected to a larger issue that remained just out of reach. The closer senior figures came to finding answers, the more complicated the questions seemed to become. And with every passing week, the emotional weight carried by those involved became increasingly difficult to hide. By the time the Aide's now famous meeting was scheduled, many within royal circles had already sensed that a turning point had arrived. The atmosphere was no longer merely tense, it was charged with anticipation. People who rarely paid attention to palace gossip suddenly found themselves listening carefully. Trusted staff members became unusually cautious with their words. Even those far removed from the discussions could feel that something important was moving beneath the surface. Nobody knew exactly what would happen next, but everyone understood that whatever decision emerged would have consequences far beyond the walls in which it was being debated. As pressure mounted behind the scenes, the gathering that would later become the subject of whispers finally took place. When the doors closed, even experienced palace employees sensed this meeting was different. Conversations stopped in hallways, schedules were altered, and security tightened in ways rarely seen for internal discussions. By the time the gathering finally began, The sense of anticipation that had been building for months had reached an almost unbearable level. Those who worked within the royal household were accustomed to discretion, but this situation felt entirely different. The meeting was surrounded by an unusual level of caution, as though everyone involved understood they were stepping into a moment that could have lasting consequences. Senior figures arrived quietly, advisors were summoned without explanation, and carefully planned routines were suddenly disrupted. Even among staff members who had spent decades navigating the complexities of royal life, there was a growing feeling that something extraordinary was unfolding behind those closed doors. What made the atmosphere even more unsettling was the caliber of the people attending. This was not a routine discussion involving minor administrative matters or ceremonial planning. According to later accounts, several high-ranking royals and trusted advisors were present, individuals whose time was carefully protected and rarely gathered together without significant reason. Their involvement immediately elevated the importance of the meeting. Questions began circulating among palace insiders. Why were so many influential figures being brought together at once? What issue could possibly require such concentrated attention? The lack of answers only deepened the mystery. As the discussions began, strict confidentiality measures reportedly came into force. Access was restricted beyond normal standards, and staff members found themselves receiving instructions unlike anything they had encountered before. Certain corridors became effectively off-limits. Employees who would typically move freely throughout key areas were advised to keep their distance. Some were even redirected away from familiar routes without explanation. The message was clear. Whatever was being discussed inside that room was not meant to leave it. Hours passed, then more hours. As time continued to slip by, speculation intensified. Those waiting outside could sense that the meeting was becoming increasingly serious. People who entered the room did not emerge. Scheduled commitments were quietly adjusted. Communications became more guarded. Every small detail added another layer of uncertainty. For many insiders, the length of the discussions alone suggested that the participants were grappling with issues far more complicated than anyone had initially imagined. According to later whispers, sensitive topics dominated the conversation. Matters concerning the future, responsibility, and the stability of key relationships were reportedly placed under intense scrutiny. While no official record would ever confirm what was said, those closest to the situation believed powerful disagreements surfaced during the discussions. Long-standing concerns that had remained beneath the surface may have finally demanded direct attention. If true, it would explain why the atmosphere reportedly became more strained as the meeting progressed. What began as a serious conversation may have evolved into something much more consequential, a confrontation between competing visions of what the monarchy needed during a period of uncertainty. As the hours stretched on, tensions reportedly increased inside the room. Participants who entered carrying confidence allegedly emerged carrying the weight of difficult decisions. Others remained behind, continuing discussions long after many expected the gathering to conclude. The longer it continued, the more convinced observers became that a pivotal moment was taking shape. Yet despite all the anticipation, despite the extraordinary precautions and the growing sense of unease, the meeting eventually ended without any public explanation whatsoever. No statement was issued. No clarification followed. The palace returned to silence, leaving behind only questions. Staff members resumed their duties. Many carried a lingering feeling that something significant had happened. Rumors continued spreading through royal circles, each version attempting to explain what had truly occurred. Yet facts remained scarce, and speculation quickly filled the void. For years, the answers remained locked away behind loyalty, protocol, and secrecy. Most assumed the truth would never emerge. Yet what happened inside those walls would remain hidden, only until one witness finally decided the truth could no longer stay buried. Years of silence ended with a single conversation. The Aide who had protected palace secrets for so long finally revealed details that challenged the carefully controlled narrative surrounding that extraordinary day. For years, speculation had thrived in the absence of answers. Rumors circulated through royal circles, theories appeared and disappeared, and countless observers attempted to piece together what had truly happened behind those closed doors. Yet, despite all the discussion, one crucial element remained missing: the testimony of someone who had actually witnessed the aftermath firsthand. That changed when a trusted aide, someone who had spent years protecting the confidentiality of the royal household, finally decided to speak. What emerged was not a dramatic confession filled with sensational accusations. Instead, it was something far more powerful, a deeply personal account of an atmosphere so emotionally charged that it left a lasting impression long after the meeting had ended. According to the Aide, the mood surrounding the gathering was unlike anything they had encountered during years of palace service. Royal life often involves pressure, difficult conversations, and moments of intense responsibility. Yet this situation reportedly felt different from the beginning. There was a weight hanging over the discussions that everyone seemed to sense, but few could openly acknowledge. The Aide described an environment where concern overshadowed confidence, where even experienced advisors appeared unusually cautious with their words. The seriousness of the moment was evident not because of what was said publicly, but because of the emotions that could not be completely hidden. Perhaps the most striking part of the account involved the visible reactions of several senior figures once the meeting concluded. According to the Aide, there was a noticeable shift in demeanor among individuals who were normally known for composure and discipline. Faces that typically projected certainty reportedly reflected concern. Conversations that usually flowed with ease became brief and guarded. It was as though everyone understood they had participated in something significant, yet no one knew exactly how its consequences would unfold. The Aide's observations challenged the long-standing belief that the gathering had been little more than an internal discussion. Instead, they suggested the issues under consideration carried far greater weight than anyone had publicly admitted. The account became even more compelling when the Aide reflected on Princess Anne herself. Throughout her public life, Anne had earned a reputation for resilience, determination, and an unwavering commitment to duty. Rarely associated with displays of emotion, she was often viewed as one of the monarchy's most dependable figures. Yet, according to the Aide, there was something unmistakably different about her following the meeting. Not weakness, not uncertainty. Rather, it was the expression of someone carrying the burden of difficult knowledge. Someone who understood the gravity of what had been discussed and the challenges that might soon follow. That observation alone fueled renewed interest in the story, because it suggested Anne recognized the significance of the moment long before anyone outside the room could have understood it. But the Aide's revelations did not stop there. They hinted that the consequences of the meeting extended far beyond the immediate discussions themselves. Decisions made that day, whether formal or informal, allegedly influenced events that unfolded in the months and years that followed. Certain relationships reportedly changed, priorities shifted. New strategies emerged behind the scenes. While the Aide stopped short of providing every answer, their testimony suggested that the meeting marked the beginning of a much larger story rather than its conclusion. Suddenly, the gathering was no longer being viewed as an isolated event. It became a turning point. Yet with every new detail, fresh questions emerged. If the discussions were truly as serious as described, what specific concerns had triggered them? What decisions were ultimately reached? And why had so many people worked so hard to keep the details hidden for so long? The Aide's testimony provided valuable insight, but it also deepened the mystery. For every answer it delivered, it seemed to uncover two more questions waiting in the shadows. The Aide's account shed new light on the emotions inside the room, but the aftermath proved even more revealing. In the days that followed, subtle changes began appearing throughout royal operations. Individually, they seemed insignificant, but together they painted a picture of a palace, responding to something far more serious than anyone publicly admitted. The Aide's testimony had pulled back the curtain on the emotions inside the meeting, but what happened afterward would prove just as revealing. At first, changes were easy to overlook. Nothing dramatic was announced. No official declaration signaled that anything unusual had occurred. Yet beneath the surface, the rhythm of royal operations began shifting in ways that caught the attention of those who knew the institution best. It was not one major development that raised concern. It was a series of small adjustments, each seemingly harmless on its own, but together creating the unmistakable impression that the palace was quietly responding to a situation of considerable importance. One of the earliest signs reportedly appeared within royal scheduling. Observers who closely followed official engagements began noticing subtle alterations. Events were rearranged. Certain appearances were adjusted. Meetings that had once been predictable suddenly became more difficult to track. While public duties continued, there was a growing sense that priorities behind the scenes were changing. Those shifts may have appeared routine to outsiders, but palace insiders understood that schedules rarely moved without reason. Every alteration suggested conversations were still ongoing long after the original meeting had ended. At the same time, reports emerged that several senior staff members were being assigned new responsibilities. Trusted advisors appeared to take on expanded roles, while others found themselves involved in projects that seemed unrelated to their previous duties. The changes were never explained publicly, yet they fueled growing speculation among those familiar with palace operations. Some wondered whether contingency plans were being reviewed. Others suspected preparations were underway for decisions that had not yet been announced. Whatever the truth, it became increasingly difficult to dismiss the feeling that something significant was unfolding behind closed doors. The atmosphere became even more intriguing as additional private consultations reportedly began taking place. What was expected to be a single important meeting appeared to evolve into a series of confidential discussions stretching across weeks and months. Senior figures continued gathering discreetly. Advisors were called in repeatedly. Questions that many assumed had been resolved seemed to remain under active consideration. According to insiders, the persistence of these meetings suggested that whatever issue had triggered the original gathering was far from settled. In fact, some believed the real consequences were only beginning to emerge. Meanwhile, public appearances became noticeably more controlled. Members of the royal family continued fulfilling their obligations, but every engagement seemed carefully managed. Statements remained measured. Interviews offered little insight. Opportunities for unscripted discussion appeared increasingly limited. It was as though an invisible line had been drawn around certain topics, and everyone understood not to cross it. The effort to maintain stability was clear, but so too was the growing challenge of containing public curiosity. That curiosity intensified as media speculation gained momentum. Journalists, commentators, and royal watchers began connecting the dots between the unusual meeting, the visible changes within palace operations, and the continued lack of explanation. Every new rumor generated fresh debate. Every unexplained development inspired another wave of questions. The palace responded with caution, offering little more than carefully worded statements that revealed almost nothing. Yet that silence often achieved the opposite of its intended effect. Instead of ending speculation, it encouraged even more of it. Inside royal circles, the uncertainty became impossible to ignore. Questions continued circulating among staff, advisors, and observers who sensed there was more to the story than anyone was willing to admit publicly. The further the palace moved to control the narrative, the more people wondered what it was trying so hard to protect. And as those questions multiplied, the story began escaping the boundaries of private discussion and entering a much larger arena. While the palace worked to maintain control, the story outside its walls was rapidly taking on a life of its own. What began as whispers among palace staff soon evolved into widespread speculation. Reporters, commentators, and royal watchers all searched for answers, but official silence only fueled greater curiosity. The moment the story escaped the confines of palace corridors, it took on an entirely new life. What had once been quiet conversations exchanged among a handful of insiders suddenly became the subject of national fascination. The unusual meeting, the growing secrecy, the Aide's eventual revelations, and the unexplained changes that followed created the perfect conditions for speculation to flourish. People wanted answers. More importantly, they wanted to understand why those answers seemed so difficult to obtain. The palace had hoped that discretion would calm growing curiosity, but instead it achieved the opposite. Every unanswered question seemed to generate 3 more. Media interest intensified rapidly. Royal correspondents who had spent years covering official engagements and ceremonial events found themselves drawn toward a mystery that appeared to deepen with each passing week. Commentators began examining every available detail, searching for clues hidden within schedules, statements, and subtle shifts in royal operations. Newspapers debated possibilities. Television panels explored competing theories. Podcasts dedicated entire episodes to analyzing what might have happened behind those closed doors. The more attention the story received, the more difficult it became to contain. Royal commentators soon found themselves divided. Some believed the meeting centered on future responsibilities within the monarchy, pointing to the unusual involvement of senior figures and the continued consultations that followed. Others suspected a more personal dispute had reached a critical stage, forcing key members of the royal family to confront difficult realities. There were even those who argued that the gathering involved decisions with consequences far greater than the public could imagine. Each theory attracted supporters. Each explanation seemed plausible, yet none could be confirmed, leaving observers trapped in a cycle of endless debate. At the center of the growing storm stood the palace itself, maintaining its commitment to silence. Requests for clarification reportedly received carefully worded responses that revealed little. Public statements remained measured and restrained. No effort was made to address the specific claims emerging from various sources. While that approach may have been intended to preserve stability, many interpreted it differently. To some, the refusal to elaborate appeared less like confidence and more like caution. The absence of explanation became a story in itself. As speculation expanded, new theories emerged from every corner. Former staff members shared observations. Royal insiders offered competing accounts. Commentators revisited old events, searching for connections that may have gone unnoticed at the time. Every interview, every appearance, and every unexplained decision was scrutinized through a new lens. The mystery surrounding the meeting became larger than the meeting itself. It transformed into a broader conversation about transparency, loyalty, and the hidden pressures that exist within one of the world's most scrutinized institutions. Public attention grew significantly. Even people who rarely followed royal affairs became intrigued by the unanswered questions. Social discussions multiplied. Articles generated intense debate. The mystery developed a momentum that no official statement seemed capable of slowing. Yet despite the growing interest, certainty remained elusive. Those closest to the events continued offering conflicting interpretations. Some insisted the significance of the meeting was being exaggerated. Others believed the public still knew only a fraction of the truth. That division among insiders only intensified the pressure. Individuals who possessed information suddenly found themselves under increasing scrutiny. Questions followed them. Speculation surrounded them. Every comment, no matter how small, was analyzed for hidden meaning. The burden of maintaining silence became heavier with every passing day, and as the mystery expanded beyond palace walls, attention gradually began focusing on one figure more than any other. Because while everyone was debating what had happened inside that room, many had started noticing something equally intriguing: the behavior of Princess Anne herself. And as the speculation intensified, Princess Anne's own actions began attracting attention unlike ever before. Throughout the controversy, Princess Anne said remarkably little. Yet those closest to the situation believe her silence spoke louder than any statement ever could. As public fascination continued to grow and speculation spread far beyond royal circles, attention gradually shifted away from the mystery itself. and toward the person standing at its center. While reporters searched for answers and commentators debated theories, Princess Anne remained exactly where she had always been, focused on duty. There were no dramatic interviews, no carefully crafted attempts to explain her position, no public effort to defend herself against the growing scrutiny. Instead, she responded in a way that had defined much of her life, by carrying on. Yet the more she refused to engage with the controversy, the more people seemed drawn to her silence. For many observers, Anne's composure became one of the most intriguing aspects of the entire story. The allegations, rumors, and questions surrounding the private meeting had generated extraordinary attention, but none of it appeared capable of distracting her from her responsibilities. Engagements continued. Commitments were honored. Official duties were carried out with the same discipline and consistency that had earned her respect over decades of service. To supporters, this was proof of character. While others became consumed by speculation, Anne appeared determined to place duty above personal concerns. That unwavering focus only strengthened the image many already held of her as one of the monarchy's most dependable figures. Yet maintaining composure did not mean escaping scrutiny. Every public appearance became the subject of renewed analysis. Every interaction was examined for clues. People searched for signs of what she might be thinking, hoping to uncover some hidden acknowledgement of the controversy that continued to dominate discussions. But Anne gave them very little. Her refusal to address the matter directly became a story in itself. Some interpreted it as strength, others viewed it as strategy. Either way, it was impossible to ignore. Supporters praised what they saw as extraordinary discipline and restraint. They argued that Anne understood something many critics overlooked, that responding publicly could easily create more questions than answers. In their eyes, her silence reflected loyalty not only to the institution, but also to the people involved. They believed she was protecting the dignity of the monarchy during a period of uncertainty. Rather than fueling controversy, she appeared committed to preventing it from spiraling further. That interpretation transformed her silence into an act of service, reinforcing the reputation she had spent decades building. Critics, however, viewed the situation differently. They questioned whether continued secrecy served the public interest. As new theories emerged and speculation intensified, some argued that silence was no longer helping the situation. Instead, they believed it was allowing confusion to grow unchecked. Why not address the rumors directly? Why not provide clarity after so much public discussion? These questions became increasingly common, creating a divide between those who admired Anne's restraint and those who wanted greater transparency. At the heart of the debate was a theme that had followed Anne throughout much of her life: loyalty. For supporters, her loyalty was precisely why she remained silent. It was a loyalty to family, to duty, and to the responsibilities she believed came with her position. For critics, that same loyalty sometimes appeared frustratingly difficult to separate from secrecy. The controversy transformed Anne's reputation into a focal point of the larger discussion. Suddenly, the story was no longer only about what had happened inside a private meeting. It was about the values that shaped the people involved and the sacrifices required to protect them. As months passed, public fascination showed no signs of fading. If anything, the mystery grew stronger. The more Anne refused to speak, the more people wanted to hear what she had to say. Yet, despite the pressure, she remained steadfast. Her silence became both a shield and a symbol, representing everything that made the story so compelling. But even the strongest silence has limits, and even the most carefully guarded secrets eventually find a way into the light. But even Anne's silence could not prevent the final piece of the puzzle from emerging. The Aide's revelation was never just about a single meeting. It was about the immense pressure, responsibility, and hidden struggles that exist behind the image of royal perfection. Behind those palace doors were difficult conversations, emotional decisions, and consequences that would ripple through the monarchy long afterward. As the final pieces of the story began falling into place, it became increasingly clear that the mystery surrounding the meeting had never been about one isolated event. The gathering itself was important, but it was only part of a much larger narrative. What truly captured public attention was what the meeting revealed about the reality of life inside one of the world's most famous institutions. For years, many had viewed the monarchy through a lens of ceremony, tradition, and stability. Yet the Aide's testimony exposed something far more human. Beneath the titles, responsibilities, and public appearances were individuals carrying enormous burdens, making difficult decisions, and confronting challenges that rarely reached public view. The true significance of that day slowly emerged through the growing understanding that the meeting represented a crossroads. It was not simply a discussion about immediate concerns. It was a moment that forced senior figures to confront questions about leadership, responsibility, and the future itself. The emotional weight described by the Aide suddenly made sense. The unusual secrecy, the tension among participants, the careful efforts to control information afterward, all of it pointed toward a situation far more serious than many had originally believed. The meeting became a symbol of the pressures that exist behind palace walls, pressures often hidden beneath a carefully maintained image of confidence and certainty. For Princess Anne, the revelations brought renewed attention to a role many people thought they already understood. For decades, she had been admired for her discipline, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to duty. Yet the Aide's account encouraged the public to look beyond those qualities and consider the personal cost that such dedication might require. Suddenly, Anne was no longer viewed simply as a reliable royal carrying out her responsibilities. She became a figure navigating difficult choices, balancing loyalty with responsibility, and carrying the weight of decisions that could affect an entire institution. Her silence, once interpreted as routine restraint, now appeared far more meaningful. The testimony also changed perceptions of the people surrounding her. Senior advisors, aides, and officials who had remained largely invisible throughout the controversy were now viewed differently. Their commitment to secrecy was no longer seen solely as protocol. For some observers, it became evidence of the immense pressures involved in protecting sensitive information. For others, it raised uncomfortable questions about transparency and accountability. The debate continued, and with every new discussion, the story evolved beyond the meeting itself. Those questions remain unresolved even now. How much should the public know about internal royal matters? Where should the line between privacy and transparency be drawn? Can an institution built upon tradition adapt to a modern world that increasingly demands openness? The Aide's revelations did not provide definitive answers, but they forced those questions into public conversation. In doing so, they ensured that the significance of the meeting would endure long after the immediate controversy faded. The monarchy itself faced renewed scrutiny as a result. What had once been a mystery confined to palace corridors became a broader examination of how power, responsibility, and loyalty operate behind closed doors. Some emerged from the story with greater admiration for those involved. Others became more skeptical. Yet regardless of where opinions landed, one fact remained undeniable. The testimony had changed the conversation forever. And perhaps that is why the legacy of that day remains unresolved. The meeting may have ended years ago, but its consequences continue to echo through discussions about duty, leadership, and the hidden realities of royal life. The answers uncovered were significant, yet they also revealed how many questions still remain. In the end, the story was never really about what happened during a single gathering. It was about what that gathering exposed about the people, pressures, and sacrifices that exist beyond public view. Because in the world of royalty, the greatest stories are rarely the ones told in public. The Aide's revelation was never just about a single meeting. It was about the immense pressure, responsibility, and hidden struggles that exist behind the image of royal perfection. Behind those palace doors were difficult conversations, emotional decisions, and consequences that would ripple through the monarchy long afterward. As the final pieces of the story began falling into place, it became increasingly clear that the mystery surrounding the meeting had never been about one isolated event. The gathering itself was important, but it was only part of a much larger narrative. What truly captured public attention was what the meeting revealed about the reality of life inside one of the world's most famous institutions. For years, many had viewed the monarchy through a lens of ceremony, tradition, and stability. Yet the Aide's testimony exposed something far more human. Beneath the titles, responsibilities, and public appearances were individuals carrying enormous burdens, making difficult decisions, and confronting challenges that rarely reached public view. The true significance of that day slowly emerged through the growing understanding that the meeting represented a crossroads. It was not simply a discussion about immediate concerns. It was a moment that forced senior figures to confront questions about leadership, responsibility, and the future itself. The emotional weight described by the Aide suddenly made sense. The unusual secrecy, the tension among participants, the careful efforts to control information afterward, all of it pointed toward a situation far more serious than many had originally believed. The meeting became a symbol of the pressures that exist behind palace walls, pressures often hidden beneath a carefully maintained image of confidence and certainty. For Princess Anne, the revelations brought renewed attention to a role many people thought they already understood. For decades, she had been admired for her discipline, loyalty, and unwavering commitment to duty. Yet the Aide's account encouraged the public to look beyond those qualities and consider the personal cost that such dedication might require. Suddenly, Anne was no longer viewed simply as a reliable royal carrying out her responsibilities. She became a figure navigating difficult choices, balancing loyalty with responsibility, and carrying the weight of decisions that could affect an entire institution. Her silence, once interpreted as routine restraint, now appeared far more meaningful. The testimony also changed perceptions of the people surrounding her. Senior advisors, aides, and officials who had remained largely invisible throughout the controversy were now viewed differently. Their commitment to secrecy was no longer seen solely as protocol. For some observers, it became evidence of the immense pressures involved in protecting sensitive information. For others, it raised uncomfortable questions about transparency and accountability. The debate continued, and with every new discussion, the story evolved beyond the meeting itself. Those questions remain unresolved even now. How much should the public know about internal royal matters? Where should the line between privacy and transparency be drawn? Can an institution built upon tradition adapt to a modern world that increasingly demands openness? The Aide's revelations did not provide definitive answers, but they forced those questions into public conversation. In doing so, they ensured that the significance of the meeting would endure long after the immediate controversy faded. The monarchy itself faced renewed scrutiny as a result. What had once been a mystery confined to palace corridors became a broader examination of how power, responsibility, and loyalty operate behind closed doors. Some emerged from the story with greater admiration for those involved. Others became more skeptical. Yet regardless of where opinions landed, one fact remained undeniable. The testimony had changed the conversation forever. And perhaps that is why the legacy of that day remains unresolved. The meeting may have ended years ago, but its consequences continue to echo through discussions about duty, leadership, and the hidden realities of royal life. The answers uncovered were significant, yet they also revealed how many questions still remain. In the end, the story was never really about what happened during a single gathering. It was about what that gathering exposed about the people, pressures, and sacrifices that exist beyond public view. Because in the world of royalty, the greatest stories are rarely the ones told in public, they are the ones hidden behind palace doors, waiting years for someone brave enough to finally break the silence. Thanks for watching. Please don't forget to like and subscribe, and we will see you in next one.